Dear Evan Hansen, what the Fair warning, there might be quite a bit. What's up, everybody? This is your co-host, Draco, and we are here to do a review of the movie Dear Evan Hansen. Now, this is going to be quite a bit of work, but we'll see how it goes. First off, I will say, here on Let's Talk Story, we are not professional journalists. What we say is our own opinions, even though we try our best to make sure that what we say is credible and has some evidence, and to be able to express a fair amount of truth so that everyone in our community will be able to enjoy it, but still take it with a grain of salt. It is our own opinions. And also with fair warnings, this might be one of those episodes where I'm going to be ranting quite a bit. Not so much out of anger, but just out of absolute sheer confusion. But I will repeat again, we are a opinionated pop culture community, and hopefully people will enjoy the stories that we tell. But with that being said, I love musicals. I really love musicals. So there's a certain weird aspect of musicals that I treated with. There's a little bit of biasness that I enjoy the cheesiness of theater. I enjoy sometimes how things can be extravagant and outrageous. But at the same time, because of my love of musical theater, there are certain aspects that I will surprisingly nitpick that people would think is not really a big deal. But it is a huge deal to me, considering that it's an aspect of musical theater that is supposed to be well done, or as a core essential, or as a foundation. And with that being said, Dear Evan Hansen. Now, for some people who are unfamiliar with the Broadway show Dear Evan Hansen, it was commissioned, I wouldn't say commissioned, but it was worked on with its first live performance project or workshop in 2015. It was written by the same people who wrote the music for The Greatest Showman. That movie starred Hugh Jackman. And I believe the names of the writers of the music was memory is not really good for me. I'm just double checking it on my notes right here. Pasek and Paul. All right. I'm just double checking my notes. Sorry guys, I know that this is live and I should have this all down, but sometimes it's nice to have my notes run in front of me. But for the most part, Benjamin Pasek and Justin Paul, the same people who did the music for Greatest Showman, wrote Dear Evan Hansen. Now, it went through a lot of workshoppings, but since its 2015 performance, it was a huge hit, and it became a reoccurring Broadway show in 2017. And in 2017, it was nominated for at least 8 to 16 Tony Awards, but 8 of them they won, including Best Musical of the Year. So there was a lot of hype with the Dear Evan Hansen show. There is a lot of hype with Dear Evan Hansen. It is on par as one of our modern Broadway musicals that is a must-see, that is incredible and is just something that you have to see. It's on the same par as Hamilton or In the Heights or The Phantom of the Opera. It's in the same category. And later on, in 2019, there's also Hadestown, which I also recommend that people see, people watch. It was amazing. I watched Dear Evan Hansen here in Seattle at the Paramount Theater. I had no idea what it was about. I just knew that it was a Broadway show, and I just love to go to Broadway shows. I heard it was the Tony Award winner, so I went to check it out. The cast that came over to Seattle was not the original Broadway New York actors. They were the traveling tour understudies. But even then, it was an amazing show. It was incredible. Probably one of my top best favorite Broadway musicals that I have personally have ever seen. It honestly, for me, it tops Hamilton. Hamilton is a great show, and Lin-Manuel Miranda is iconic and a master in his craft in his own particular category. But there's something about Hamilton that might be a discussion for later on that kind of puts me into not so much as a con, but I kind of don't consider Hamilton in high regards as much as I consider Dear Evan Hansen in high regards. But again, that's just for another episode. All that to being said is Dear Evan Hansen was just an amazing show. I love it. It's one of my favorites. And honestly, when I heard that there was going to be the movie Dear Evan Hansen, which just premiered here in 2021, around, I believe, it was September 25th for me, but I'm sure it was different days for other people. When I heard that the Dear Evan Hansen musical was going to be turned into a movie, I was very, 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 very upset. So upset. Just so upset. But I am getting ahead of myself. Why don't I first start off with context? Unlike my other previous review, one, I'm actually going to fully review this movie, but two, I don't think I need to spoil anything in order to fully review it. So, I'm just going to give context as we go along through this movie as best as I can. I'm not going to give spoilers, and again, I'm going to repeat again, I don't think it's necessary to let people know about the spoilers to get the full scope of whether this movie is great or something weird. And in my opinion, bro, that was so weird. Dear Evan Hansen is a story of Evan Hansen, who is a high schooler that is diagnosed with clinical depression and personality disorders. Something of a therapy exercise that he conducts is to write notes to himself, encouragement notes. Now, on his first day of school, he tried his best, but the day didn't go out exactly as how he planned it would, as he planned or what he hoped for. So, in his, I would say a different term, rather into a stress rant rather than encouragement, he rewrote his notes in a more depressing manner, saying how his life was terrible, his day was terrible, and he does not understand or wants to understand or was willing to keep going with the day. People, even without spoilers, people can kind of notice that there are some suicidal tendencies with this character. Ellen accidentally bumps into another student who has personality disorders or behavioral difficulties named Connor Murphy. Connor notices this letter that has certain information in it that can be connected to him, and he took that very aggressively. he took that as an offense to himself. So Connor takes that letter. Well, shucks, I think this would be a spoiler. I guess it kind of is a spoiler. So I keep in mind. The letter did mention about how Evan Hansen has a crush on Connor's sister, Zoe. So when Connor knows Zoe's name in this letter, in this ranting letter that Evan has, he becomes very upset and he steals the letter. The next week, we find out that Connor has committed suicide. And because he had Evan's therapy letter with him that was addressed as Dear Evan Hansen, people kind of came up with the idea that it was a suicide note that Connor was writing for Evan, and because it was just to Evan, people kind of decided that there was a friendship connection between the two. There wasn't, but it was something that Evan could not bring himself to deny. And the events of the movie happens because of this denial. Evan does not deny that he was not Connor's best friend. He just continues on with the story that he is. And that's the movie. That's basically the movie. Evan pretends to be Connor's friend after the suicide. And from there, it continues on. And I would say there are certain elements of that story that can resonate really well with our modern times, particularly in the past 20 years. The musical and the story utilizes a lot of the support, benefits, and the, I wouldn't say hurt, but the detriments of social media, which is one of the core plot elements of the movie. The use of social media today, not just like our technologies, computers and phones, but specifically social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and everything like that. They play a huge part in this story to expand it more to, well, I wouldn't say not so much to expand it more, but to really kind of show how our world that we have right now utilizes the technologies that we have right now. The culture that was built because of those technologies, they have a different set of stories in comparison to stories that happened 20 years back or 30 years back. In the 90s, we had stories of drugs and gangs and this ability to try to reconnect with our societies. In 2000s, it was international terror because of what happened at the World Trade Centers. And now, in 2010 to 2020, it really is an era of social media. And the stories have changed so much because of this. And I would say that Dear Evan Hansen did a great job in utilizing that element in the story. And this is and circling back. This is why I would say that Dear Evan Hansen is a great story for our time, because there's just these core elements of depression, core elements of support, core elements of truth versus lying, which are just universal lessons all the way through, no matter what, and will always resonate with us. But our world is different because of social media. Our stories of depression is different now because of social media. Our stories of truths and lies are vastly different because of social media. And Evan Hansen was just spectacular in exploring these elements. And that's just the social media. There's also the change of just how society works in comparison of the social media life and the real life, and trying to see a balance of, can these two lives work out together? Or can these two lives coexist? It goes along the lines of the truths and lies of which life should we consider a benefit to our society. Is it the life in social media that can easily be a lie? that's reconstructed into something that could be seen as beneficial, but is still a lie? Or is the benefit of society is in the real life, in the harshness of our life, in this reality where nothing is as perfect as picture perfect. Nevin Hansen was just a great show that was able to explore these elements. Their stage design elements and their costuming just reflected those key those needed story elements in such an incredible way, and just the songs that they wrote are just spot on. Not only are they slaps, not only are they amazing, the lyrics are just wonderful and they're just great and they just like really. I can't help myself to get a little emotional when I hear these songs, especially the title song "Waving Through the Window," which is something of my own, not only personal favorite, but it's a personal favorite on a very connected emotional level. So this musical means a lot to me, and if we were to continue to review into it, it means a lot to other people. It is so relevant of our times in the past 10 to 20 years. And then they announced the movie. Now, there are other reviewers that can probably groan at this, and we can probably just take it as like, oh, like the old school critics cannot appreciate cinematography, to which I say, bullshit. Just because it's live action does not make it high art, nor does it improve the original story. Even if the original is seen as inferior, there are just certain elements of musical. There are just certain elements of animation that our modern day cinematography are just not getting. And they're just missing out, losing out on the messages and lessons and even the bare bones minimum of entertainment that the old movies have. And again, I'm sure there's a lot of people who are saying like, well, that's just old school critic talking. It's like you can't appreciate the things that are new, but hear me out on this. Certain movie musicals are amazing and wonderful. Like for me personally, Greatest Showman and La La Land are musicals that are meant to be in movies. In fact, what am I saying? They were movie musicals. There's no Broadway of La La Land, and there's no Broadway of Greatest Showman. They were specifically created to have their music and choreography explored on a cinematic level. They were meant to be movies. Sometimes there are just musical shows that are just not going to work on a cinematic level. There are certain elements of a musical theater that you just have to appreciate on the stage. There is some merit when people have to say, you just have to see it for yourself. Because part of a musical theater's not so much entertainment level, but also their story level requires immersion. You have to be there. You have to actually interact with the stage in order for you to not only appreciate the stories, but to even be able to understand these stories. And for instance, we got Cats that tried their best to bring it on the big screen, but I feel like it lost that immersion touch that made Cats so wonderful on the stage to begin with. In fact, there's parts of the musical, of the Cats musical, where the actors do perform in the audience as part of the show, as part of the story. How are you going to be able to recreate that on a movie? And on top of that, there was a certain element of the costume design that gave Cats its identity. Now, I'm not going to say that their costume designs are masterful and remarkable, but I can say that it's theirs. I mean, you can change up Batman's suit all the time, but you still need the pointy ears and the emblem, no matter what. That's the iconic stuff. Even though people would say that the pointy ears are dumb, it's not a Batman suit without the pointy ears. I would probably say the same thing about Cats, in that it's not a Cats movie unless you have the full body, you have the full body suits and the makeup. The special effects that they had on the movie is like not only was it on a level that it didn't look really well or wasn't done really well, but it took away that identity that Cats had that you can only get at the musical theaters. The costume, the makeup, like you can't go anywhere without thinking Cats when you see, the makeup design of Cats. But if you look at the movie Cats with Idris Elba and Taylor Swift and all those guys, and you see how they do their CGI cinematography, then it's like it's not really a unique identity to themselves. I would say it's almost like a cinematic ripoff of James Cameron's Avatar. CGI people. There's really no identity that you can connect with it. There's no immersion that you can enjoy, and the story just doesn't make sense because you lose that identity and you lose that immersion. Some movie musicals are meant to work because they're meant for the movie. Mary Poppins, Greatest Showman, La La Land. But other musicals are not meant for the movies. They're meant to be experienced in the theater. Dear Evan Hansen is a musical that you have to experience on the stage. And it didn't really work well in the movies. For instance, I have here a few examples. A little bit of a spoiler, but I'm going to show an example of the show starting song that caused Dear Evan Hansen to be a trend to begin with. The iconic signature song, Waving Through the Window. So hold on for a moment. Let me pull up my notes. Let me pull up my clips. This scene shows probably on a surface level example of why some musicals will not work for the theater. For the movies. That you need to have that immersion in order to appreciate it and to enjoy it. So, here we go. What I'm going to show first is the live action. This particular show was at the Tony Awards. So, let me pull it up really quick. Got it. So, here's the live action version of Waving Through the Window. Really quick. When you're falling in a and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you're falling in a forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? It's like I never made a sound. Will I ever make a sound? On the outside, always looking in, will I ever be more than I'm always been? Cause I'm tapping on the glass, waiting through the window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear, so I wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass, waiting through the window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? So that was the Tony Awards as an example of the live theater musical of Evan Hansen. And here is a clip of the film of the exact same song. Hold on for a second. I got this. I can do this. So this is the exact same song, but this is the film version. And it looks like this.
When you fall into the forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you fall in the forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? It's like I never made a sound. Will I ever make a sound? On the outside, always looking in. Will I never be more than I've always been? Cause I'm tapping on the glass. Waiting through the window. I try to speak, but nobody can hear. So I wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass. Waiting through the window. Can anybody see? Is anybody waving back at me? Is anybody waving? Wait on, wait on, oh.
Hey, Kavok. So there are noticeable difference between the two, and it just you can probably define the problems of the movie based on that scene alone of how this was a musical that was not going to work on the big screen, and on top of that just the way that it was just the way that the movie was directed, which will I will get to that in the last portion of the show. But first, we need to talk about these scenes, and I need some courage. Let's look at the live action really quick. I mean, not the live; they're both live action. Let's look at the theater really quick. Ooh, let's bring this back. So, if you can, so the waving through the window is the first day of school, and it's describing Evan's anxiety of how like he seems so from separate from the world that he's in, and how he's even more separated because of the social media that they have, where people are displaying how their lives seem to work and his doesn't. And every time it goes on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, like people are showing how like their lives just seems to be together, and his isn't. Now, a lot of people will say that, like, well, the social media the social media is not the real life. It's not the actual what the actual person is going through, what the actual what their lives are really are. But look at this choreography really quick. Look at this choreography really quick.
Make a sound when you're falling. Never make a sound. Never really crash or even make a sound.
Let me make this a little bit softer. You can see how like he's so, even in the real world he seems so disconnected from everyone, because based on this choreograph alone, like people's backs are turned against him. Their backs are facing him, and it makes him feel even more disconnected. Not only do you have the social media, which by the way, those are the set designs of the show and how they're able to display their social media, the social media aspects of the story, which I for one thought this projector style just brilliant. It's totally brilliant. But not only do you have social media displaying picture perfect lives displayed in the background, in real life with the cast around Evan, people have their backs against him, so even in real life, he feels disconnected. Now, I've once said in my past reviews that entertainment has to exaggerate so that the story or the lessons of the story can be obvious. So obviously, this isn't an exaggeration, but at least it's made. At least it helps to make it clear. It helps to make that lesson clear. Yes, it's exaggerated, but it hits that point. Evan feels disconnected from the world. Evan in real life still feels disconnected from the world. And as far as he's concerned, he feels that people are intentionally doing it on purpose to stay disconnected from him. That people are on purpose turning their backs on him. And this choreography just continues to just let's keep going. So he just there's also that anxiety, nervousness, how people are not moving, but he still shies away from them. And then there's this scene. Probably one of my favorite choreographies in Broadway musicals. And I've seen Chorus Line. I've seen Drowsy Chaperone. They're amazing dance choreographies, and yet this is the one that I feel like has the most influence because it just shows that anxiety that Evan fears the most appearing to be true. People are putting in the attention, people are putting in the effort to turn their backs on him. And that's what his anxiety feels. And that simple turn away on the stage, and then you see it on the stage, it's like you could just kind of feel, man, there's some moments in life where I feel like that. And you know what? I will add this. Again, I will say that exaggeration is needed for entertainment so that the lesson is made more obvious. But for Dear Evan Hansen, it works. It works in his favor. The exaggeration works in his favor because you have to remember, Evan has clinical depression. So we don't know, as an audience, we don't know if this exaggeration is actually coming from Evan's perspective, which can be very similar to other um, other people, other real life people who have clinical depression who also feel like this, where life does feel like an exaggeration of what they are afraid of the most, or what they are concerned about the most, or what they're most anxious about. So yeah, we can always say it's like, oh, that's such an exaggeration. It's like people are literally turning their backs on him. But to somebody that has depression, this might be how they perceive the world. And it was on stage for you to experience that. And then they go on with their lives, even though they're oblivious, even though you can kind of see it in the actors' faces. They're not doing this on purpose. They're just going on with their lives. They're oblivious to Evan's problems. People are just going on with their lives. It's not their fault. They are not intentionally trying to disconnect from him. They're just living life just like him. But to Evan, this is so hurtful beyond measure. Like he can't cope with just this hurtful pain of being so cut away from people. In fact, if you were to put into that consideration that people are just living out their lives and just being normal, and they're not intentionally trying to break away or cut away from Evan, then that would mean that the normal response, the normal answer for society to somebody like Evan is, yeah, to cut away from you. It is normal to turn their backs on you. And you see it on stage, you get to experience it, you get to watch it, and there's a certain feeling that you get as you're connecting with it on the stage. Now, oh boy. Now, let's compare it to let's compare it to the film. Let's compare it to the film version, which I need more help. Better. Let's reverse this back a little bit.
In the forest and there's nobody home. Do you ever really crash or even make a sound? When you fall in the forest and there's nobody around, do you ever really crash or even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? Did I even make a sound? It's like I never made a sound.
Now, of course, the movie is not set up in TikTok fashion. This is just a trailer because there's no movie clips to share yet on YouTube of the on the movie. It just recently came out, but it's not the TikTok format that we're looking at. It's just how it's filmed. How it's just a busy hallway, and Evan is singing to himself, and there's something about that that feels realistic and grounded, but it doesn't give you that sense that he's anxious. It doesn't give you that sense of depression. It doesn't give you that sense of disconnect that we were having in the in the stage version. Because I mean, yeah, it seems a little bit more grounded, but like the whole emotional story of Evan Hansen is his feeling of disconnect from the world. And if you put him in a crowded space, constantly being surrounded by people, even if they're not, interacting with him, even though it looks like he's alone. I mean, like, it just looks like a guy standing by himself in the hallway. It doesn't come off with that feeling of painful loneliness. It's just a guy in the hallway. That's all it is. It's a guy in the hallway. Like, you can't feel anything from it.
No, will I ever make a sound?
And it doesn't change it. If you guys had noticed that the musicality drops, this should be the part of the choreography where it has my favorite. This should be part of the song where it has my favorite choreography, the whole back turning. But look at it. Wait around for an answer to appear while I'm watching people pass. Like nothing. It shows nothing. It just shows a regular guy. Evan is just a regular guy, but that's not the story. Evan is not a regular guy. Evan is a guy who's hurting. Evan is a guy who has clinical depression. But based on this clip, we don't know that because he's just filmed as just a regular guy who's just having a bad day. But that's not the story. That's not the story. That's not the Evan Hansen that we are supposed to follow in this story. There's such an obvious disconnect of the attempt of expressing the emotions of the story, which is the cornerstone of this particular movie, to having these emotional struggles that are so heavy that you go along with the happenstance and coincidence of this movie because it gets you out of this loneliness, if even just for a few days or a few moments. If even for a few moments you won't feel like the world's turned its back on you, then hells yeah, I'll lie about my life and just post on social media whatever I want. Yeah, I was Connor's friend. Sure. If it means that I'm able to leave that moment of loneliness and hurt, I'll go along with it. From the waving through the window scene with the musical version, you get that sense. You get that struggle, you get that conflict, you kind of get yourself ready of like, this is how the story is gonna be, but we don't know how far he'll take it or how far he will take it. but we understand that that's going to be the conflict of the story. This idea of being so engrossed in your depression, how far will you go with the lie of social media in order to escape that? The musical theater version, with its choreography and set designs, establish that conflict. But the movie version doesn't. It is so devoid of emotions. It just shows a guy walking. It just shows a guy having a bad day, but it does not establishes the emotional conflict that we know is what this movie is going to be about. Oh my gosh. There is just so much about this movie that's just so, it just misses the mark. And shucks, oh, my timestamp's over here. See, like when I'm recording, I gotta record timestamp over there, but I know that the timestamp is over here. I thought this review was gonna be a little bit shorter because I was gonna be straightforward how I didn't like this movie. But seeing as I'm already like 40 minutes into this and I never even discussed any other elements about the movie that didn't work, I mean, oh my gosh, there's like I can probably go on a lot longer about how this movie doesn't work. If you made it this far, you're a true fan. And if you want to, strap in. There's so much more to talk about. So, what I've established so far with comparing those two scenes is how the tonnage of the movie is not going to work on a cinematic level. It'll probably work better on a musical theater, stage theater level, but it's not going to work out on a cinematic level, particularly in the way that it was filmed. I would have thought that they would try to have the attempt of choreographing something similar to the stage. Like maybe have a dance choreography where like Evan would walk into the gym and people, the entirety of the gym, all 200 of those students would all turn their backs to him. Something like that would have been very effective. But if you had noticed in that scene, it was not filmed that way. It was filmed just strictly it just was filmed strictly grounded and realistic in that in the real world there are no dancing. And it's like, come on, man, this is a musical. It's like you can let yourself go and have some dance numbers because like the expression of some of these lyrics are not going to be able to be appreciated when just like a stagnant movie moving movement where the guy is just only walking and not really doing anything else. There's something about this movie where I feel like they wanted to treat this real, grounded, and realistic, trying to avoid the quote unquote tropes of musicals, such as unrealistic dance numbers that come out of nowhere, or imagination that suddenly becomes real because it relates to the story, or coincidences and happenstances that just so happens to be in favor of the story or plot line. The majority of the time, it would favor the romance of the story. But the which I can kind of understand how some people have that preference for it. But I felt like taking away all of those dance numbers, taking away all those choreographs, and making it like a very strict, realistic film, made it very devoid of its emotions that the lyrics are trying to, that the songs are trying to portray. In fact, what I kind of noticed about this movie is that because it was filmed like a very basic straight drama film, the songs that this story is known for Like the cornerstone identity of Dear Evan Hansen's the songs made made it they were just distracting. They were distracting. The songs were not entertaining. It kind of pulled us away from the dialogues that the characters were having, which is such a weird thing because, like, I'm of the opinion that if they had just done the show in a more dramatic, realistic style, then possibly, yeah, possibly it would have worked because the story was just like was the story works on that level. The story is like so pivotal in like not really pivotal, but like so relatable for real life depressing dramas that like without the songs, the story can still work. It's just that Dear Evan Hansen is known for its songs. So like, how can you have a Dear Evan Hansen songs? How can you have a Dear Evan Hansen project without the songs? And yet the movie treats the songs as if they were a distraction. If anything, like anytime a character sings, they look so weird. They look like one of those like crazy people that you look like one of those crazy strangers that you see on the streets that'll just burst out into like a monologue out of nowhere. Like you'll be standing next to somebody in a bus stop, and then all of a sudden the guy standing next to you, you'll be standing next to a guy in a bus stop, and all of a sudden that guy starts spouting out Shakespeare for no apparent reason. Just like standing there, just all of guys like to be or not to be. But can you imagine if he was singing it to be or not to be? And it's just like you would get freaked out by that in real life. But the weird thing is like the movie is feels like that without choreography or without any inventive or imaginative cinematography. I mean the songs just feel like out of nowhere, like just like distracting. Like you'll have a character stand up and still act and work his way around as if he was in a Martin Scorsese movie while singing. Like he'll still be doing regular dialogue motions, but he's singing. And it's so weird. It's so distracting. And it's just like, well, if you're not gonna act in a musical, then why sing at all? It's like if you're just gonna treat it as like a regular straight movie, then like you could have retranslated these songs into dialogue. I mean, the lyrics of these songs are actually really well written that you can probably speak these lines and they can still hit an emotional chord, but they couldn't. They couldn't because Evan Hansen was made famous by these songs. So you're gonna need these songs, but they just felt as if they were just distractions, as if they didn't want them to be songs. But it would be crazy not to put them in. So it's just like the the choice of their direction in this movie was so confusing that it hurt the film a lot. I think without the songs, this would have been an okay movie. I'm not going to say that it was a great movie, but as I said earlier on, the story is so relatable for a lot of people that without the songs and just strictly the story, it would have been fine. Or they could have gone the other route of just like going full blown at it, just like musical number, where people were actually contributing to the dance choreographies or actually being inventive with their cinematography, where the camera would spin around in inventive ways, like how they did in La La Land or Greatest Showsman. But just like, oh, they didn't. It's oh my gosh, I'm gonna say this. It's like watching a Lifetime movie. It was like watching a Lifetime drama movie except that instead of talking, people were singing. So the choice of direction that this movie had just would not would not, it did not work. And there could have been so many things that they could have done to fix it. I just mentioned earlier on, they could have just go all ham and just included the dance numbers. Make it imaginative, because at least we'll have that emotional invoking in us based on how good the choreography is. But they didn't. Not only that, and this is going to sound really hard for a lot of people, it was a bad idea to cast Ben Platt. Ben Platt is not a high schooler anymore. Ben Platt is nearly 30 years old, 27 or 30. Now, that being said, I can understand why they brought in Ben Platt. It was just to try to hammer in that credibility. This will be a good Dear Evan Hansen movie if we have the original Evan Hansen, which is actor Ben Platt. So for people who don't know, I apologize. For people who don't know about Dear Evan Hansen, the main actor Ben Platt, that is the actual original actor since 2015 who plays Evan Hansen. That what like Ben Platt was there at the beginning of the workshop, and he's the primary actor when they perform in New York on Broadway, New York. Normally, he's not the guy that goes on tour, but regardless, whenever you hear Evan, he's so pivotal. No, not pivotal. He is so connected to the project that whenever you hear Evan Hansen, and you're a fan of musical, whenever you hear Evan Hansen, you automatically connect the name Ben Platt to that. Just like how when people hear, it's in the same vein as when people say Luke Skywalker, you think Mark Hamill, or when you say Indiana Jones, you think Harrison Ford. These actors have invested so much work and were made so obvious that they were casted right that like you can't disconnect the name from the character. So understandably so, they would cast Ben Platt. But the thing is, Ben Platt is not a is not a film actor, at least not yet. I heard he's doing well with FX because they added him into a TV show called Saints, and I heard he's doing fine with it. But here, here in this movie, he's not a good film actor, and he's cast with good film actors because along with him, there are other actors like Amy Adams and Julianne Moore who are also like legendary actresses, but for and they do the part well. They do I mean like they're great actors. They're gonna do it well. But the contrast between the exaggerant nature of Ben Platt and the subtle film actions of Amy Adams were, for some people, very obvious. Like it's very obvious that Ben looks uncomfortable on film. Whether he is or isn't is not my call. I'm not that great of a critic to be able to recognize, bad acting. In all honesty, it's like I saw that he was trying the best that he could. But there are certain aspects that just looks like either he wasn't giving his best or he was told to tone down. And when I say wasn't giving his best, I'm probably it's probably the same thing. There are certain aspects of the movies where it looked like he was told to tone it down, to not give his best. Otherwise, he'll be the huge expression like how he is on stage. Because you can tell from his hand gestures, you can tell from his 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 body position, and you can tell by his voice he wants to overact because he's meant to overact, and like considering that he's been Evan Hansen for the past 7 years, this is probably his natural habit with this character. It matters like hundreds of shows as this character on Broadway. You have the muscle memory of how Evan is supposed to be worked, and you're told not to use them. Like it was I can understand the marketing aspect, but I kind of really thought that casting Ben Platt to be Evan Hansen was just not going to work. Not in regards to his age, although that was a huge factor because whoever was his marketing and lighting department just did not do him any favors, which, by the way, on a basic movie level, this movie had really bad lighting. It had really, really dark scenes. And I bet you those dark scenes was so that they can kind of cover up Ben Platt's face a bit to make him look younger. But it made those scenes look really, for lack of better terms, ugly. Like they were very grainy and everything like that. and his makeup department just did not help him at all. He does not look younger. He looks sick. He looks like he's a sickle, not sickle man. He looks like he's a very sick man all throughout the movie. He just looks. I don't want to say that he's miserable. I bet you that he had a great time on film, but he looked miserable. It probably was the and it was probably was the makeup cast trying to make him look younger, but they didn't do any help for him. They didn't make him look younger. They made him look like a sad, sick high schooler. And the weird thing is, the casting was so weird because like you would think that if they were gonna cast Ben Platt on the original Evan Hansen to add to the credibility of the movie, then they might as well bring in the other original cast members. I mean, heck, just like bring in everybody, and like we can tell that they're all not their age, but they're gonna act. They're gonna act like like their characters, and we can suspend our disbelief and enjoy that they're gonna try and act out this story because we're not concerned about believability. We're concerned about the story. But the weird thing is that they didn't. Not only did they have Amy Adams and Julianne Moore, who were never connected to this project from the beginning, who were never a part of the Dear Evan Hansen production on the Broadway productions at all. But then you have all these other newcomer actors that are obviously younger than Ben Platt. So they did not have the original actors for Zoe Murphy, Connor Murphy, and Jared and Alana, who are like the four other main characters in this story. They had newcomers, like all four, like those four that I mentioned, who are his high school classmates. They were new actors, and I cannot get their names off the top of my head. But like, yeah, they're just like these are brand new actors, that have mostly done TV shows, and now they're doing their Evan Hansen film, and their age is so obvious in comparison to Ben Platt. In fact, there are just certain weird moments where like Ben Platt doesn't really have that much of a chemistry with his high school co-stars, but he has a little bit of a chemistry with Julianne Moore and Amy Adams because they're around the same age, which makes it really weird because it looks like a high school graduate trying to like flirt with a bunch of moms. Ugh. All that being said, though, there are certain elements of the movie that were all right and okay. I'm not going to spoil it, but the ending was tweaked. Like literally, one word was added to the ending, which gave the film its own identity that made it different from the staged production. But it was a difference that I felt if this had been a story meant for film, that's the ending that it would take. The Evan Hansen movie had a great ending, but you had to go through 2 hours of awkwardness in order to get to there. With terrible cinematography, no choreography, just the obvious acting, the differing acting styles between Ben Platt and everybody else. This movie was just so incredibly awkward all the way through until the ending, and I'm I wouldn't say I'm upset about it, but so confused about it that they would make these choices. Choices that they could have fixed, like the hell with it, add in some dance numbers, or if they're gonna cast Ben Platt, might as well bring in the entire original cast. As is, it is a attempt of redesigning what is obviously supposed to be meant for stage into cinema, and it didn't work out very well. Like, did not work out very well. If I were to give a rating for this movie, huh, even without any biasness, because there are some elements, the foundational elements of this film that did not work. So that even if this wasn't a Dear Evan Hansen movie, and this was just a Lifetime movie, the cinematography of this film and the costuming of these films was just so weird that it was just not worth it. Ah, I would say that this movie is like probably around a 5 out of 10. Like just it was it was just not a good movie. It was just not a good movie. It was not a good movie. And it could have, like, what hurts is that one, it could have been a good movie. It could have been something like La La Land or Greatest Showman. But most of all, what hurts is that it's Dear Evan Hansen. A great show, a great story. And I would still encourage that once Broadway opens and Dear Evan Hansen gets on tour again, this is a show that people must watch. Broadway fans must watch Dear Evan Hansen because it's just such a wonderful a project. This is such a wonderful art creation. Really a product of our times and really has a lesson for us for this time. And the stage does it so well, but the movie doesn't. I would probably rate this movie as a 5 out of 10 movie. But it is only my own opinion. And if you have a differing opinion from me, then feel free to add it to the comments. Or if you like to, you can probably also DM me on my Twitter. I'm still getting used to this. If you like to, if you either agree with me or disagree with me, then you can feel free to find me on my Twitter account at 3cdraco. And DM me your thoughts about it. Do you agree that this movie was not gonna work? Do you agree that Dear Evan Hansen could have been done better? Or do you disagree and thought that the movie was actually really good? Tell me your stories. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Thank you guys for putting up with this very long review. I mean, I just had so much to talk about this movie. But again, I hope that you enjoyed this story. And I'll see you guys at the next one. Shoots.